Welcome back to Cloud and DevOps with James Cook. Today we have an exciting topic for you, leveraging the Terraform AzAPI provider to enhance your Azure automation. But first, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all our tech content. Let's get started. So you may be wondering, what exactly is the Terraform AzAPI provider? In simple terms, it's a powerful extension for Terraform that enables seamless integration with Azure's REST API. With this provider, you can interact with Azure resources using Terraform, providing fine-grained control over your infrastructure deployment and management. Now that we know what it is, let's talk about how to use it. Integrating the AzAPI provider into your Terraform workflow involves a few key steps. You'll need to install the provider, specifying it in your Terraform configuration file, and then start defining your Azure resources using the AzAPI provider syntax. Let's jump into a quick code example to illustrate the process. First, we need to create a providers.tf file where we will store the provider information. Providers.tf, and then in here what we'll do is we'll type in Terraform and required providers, and then the required provider we want for this demo is AzAPI, and we are going to source it, and we're going to source it from Azure AzAPI. So that's where we're going to get the provider installation. And then we're going to now call the provider information, which is just AzAPI. It's basically saying I just want to use AzAPI. If you have subscription ID and client ID of the requirements, it's fine. I'm logged in via the Azure CLI for this example. So from that, I should be able to bring up a terminal window. Like that, and go Terraform initialize, so Terraform init, and then we'll start installing the AzAPI. And you can see it's installing version 1.11.0, and there you go, the Terraform provider is installed. But when should we use the AzAPI provider over the standard AzureRM provider? The AzureRM provider is fantastic for most scenarios, but the AzAPI provider shines when you need advanced features, final control over API calls, or when working with Azure services in preview. It's your go-to choice for scenarios requiring direct interaction with the Azure REST API. Now, if you want to leverage both providers in the same Terraform configuration, good news. Terraform supports using multiple providers simultaneously. This means you can harness the convenience of the AzureRM provider while tapping into the advanced capabilities of the AzAPI provider within the same script. Let me show you. So all we have to do is add another provider. So what we're going to do is add a required provider, AzureRM, and it mostly auto completes here with Copilot, but what I'm going to just quickly do is take out the version because I will use the latest version that's available. And then all I have to do is specify the provider here. That's fine. And then provide that provider any required features. Even if you don't specify features for the AzureRM, you still need that available. Now we have that, we can now Terraform. Actually, what we'll do is we'll clear this, initialize again, which we've got the AzAPI already, so it won't go off and download that again. But what you can see is it's now downloading and installing the AzureRM from HashiCorp version 3.86.0, and that's installed. So now, using both, we can create a resource using the AzureRM provider, and we can use the AzAPI yet to do a advanced amendment, I should say. So for this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to create a resource group called AzureRM using the IAC, and then AzAPI to configure a preview feature that's not available in AzureRM. So what we're going to do first is create a main.tf and a data sources.tf. I like to split up my code. You can put everything into main.tf, but I then can find the code a little bit easier. Good practice. For data sources, I'm just going to copy and paste a couple of existing resources here, and then in the main.tf, what we're going to do is first of all specify we want a resource, and we want to create with the AzureRM provider a resource group, and we're just going to call this AzureRM_AzAPI. This resource group's not going to have anything in it. It's just an example of showing that the AzureRM will create along with the AzAPI provider. We're going to call it name equals AzureRM-AzAPI, and we're going to specify the location to be let's go UK South. Then what we can do is we want to amend a existing resource. So I have a resource, a container instance that I would like a system identity. System identity in Azure for container instances is still in preview and it's not available in the AzureRM provider. So for me to configure that as code, I will need to use the AzAPI. So if I type in AzAPI, I have 4 options of resource types to specify. I can use a Azure AzAPI data plane resource, a resource itself, a resource action, or an update resource. I will provide a link in the description to the provider with the details on all 4 and what they do. Because I have an existing resource, I will be using the AzAPI update resource. What happens is though that when I delete this code block in the future, once this is deployed, it will not amend the resource yet to say destroy that config. It will just continue to exist. If you're creating a new resource from scratch, the best option is to use the AzAPI resource option, and that will then give you the full configuration requirements and will deprecate any settings but after it's been deleted from block. So update resource, and then container instance system identity, that's what I'm using it for, and then resource ID. So I will require as part of the AzAPI is to provide a resource ID. What I've done already is I've got my container instance here, and this will grab the ID as part of that grab of the data source. So what I'm going to do here is just call a data autocomplete. So I'm basically saying here I need the data AzureRM container group #eval.id, so that will get the resource ID for me. The type, so I need to describe what the resource type is, and this can't be just this will have to be, because it's using Azure's REST APIs, it needs to be in the API format requirement for type. So for example, this one is Microsoft.container instances /container groups. At the end, I need to specify the API version I want. You can get a lot of this information already. If it's an existing resource, you can just go to the resource page and go to JSON view, like so. So you can see here that there's a JSON view here, and if you click on it, it will then give you specific information. if you search for through the JSON code, either using Control F or Command F, and type in type, you should be able to find the type of resource it is. And then if you need a API version, you can use the drop down at the top. The one that's highlighted is the one that this instance is using currently. So this one is the 2019 12.01 version. Type in 2023 05.01. Sorry, not 01. 15 hyphen preview, because I want to use the preview version. Okay, so we've defined our resource ID, the one that we need to update, and the type of resource it is. Now, because we're working with a REST API, we need to provide the JSON data that we want to update. So we need to specify the body. And what we're going to do is type in JSON code and properties, because it's in the properties. This config is in the JSON. And then identity, and I'm working with is its own block. And the type is system assigned. Okay, brilliant. So if I do a Terraform plan, so I just had to rename the JSON encode mistype. And then what we're going to do is just run Terraform plan again. And there we go. We've got a plan that is both AzureRM actions, as you can see here, the creation of a resource group, but I can also still use another provider to actually do another action, and that's the AzAPI, and that's going to be amending a resource. But what about if I want to use the data output from that creation of a system assigned identity? So for example, a system assigned identity I can use here to provide the resource access to a key vault, for example. I need from that the principal ID that and the tenant ID that it will create. So what I'm going to do is have a export of that information once it's created, so it's available to me in code here for later on for assigning things like permissions here to key vaults. So within the resource block, we want a response export values, and in here I know that in the identity block I want the principal ID, and I will also want the tenant ID that the system identity is created in. And then what I can do for this example is create a outputs.tf, and what I'm just going to do here is, and these are the outputs that we will want out of the system identity once it's created. They will output on terminal. Maybe I do not want it outputting on terminal anyway, so I can delete these, but the important bit is to have the response export values available, so that when you are creating other resources in future, like I say a key vault, and you're doing permissions and you want that system identity to have permissions to the key vault, then you can call it these values, and to call the values you'll be using this type of syntax where you say JSON decode and then you call the resource and then the information, the block, and then the value. So what we're going to do is a Terraform apply, because we will be deploying the code, but we will get a plan out first, which says it's going to create two resources, which is one, the resource group, there it is, and the other is the AzAPI. Cool, here it is. And finally, we can see the outputs, and that's just for my reference anyway. You do not have to have it outputting via the terminal, but it's good to have the outputs, the exports or values available for use within code. So I'm going to go yes, and this is just to demonstrate that both providers will work together. Doesn't matter, you can mix other providers with from AWS and that to it, and it will work. And it's completed. So we've been able to apply the two resources and output our principal ID and tenant ID. So that is now configured. Here's our AzureRM AzAPI that was created. And here is our system assigned identity that is now turned on. Combining the AzAPI and AzureRM providers give you the best of both worlds. You get the convenience and simplicity of AzureRM provider for standard resources, while having the flexibility and advanced features of the AzAPI provider when needed. It's a powerful approach to handle diverse infrastructure requirements within the same Terraform codebase. So whether you're choosing between AzAPI and AzureRM or using them together, Terraform offers the flexibility to meet your specific automation needs. Experiment with both, understand their strengths, and tailor your approach based on their requirements of your Azure environment. If you have any questions or insights on using both providers, feel free to share them in the comments below. Check out my blog, jamescook.dev, where I have shown examples of using the AzAPI for preview features where I've had to handle settings in regards to Cosmos continuous backup solution where the features are still in preview and require to adopt the AzAPI to configure those as code. Like the video if you found it valuable, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth tech content. Thanks for watching and happy automating.